Hello, hello. It is for those listeners who are listening. We are recording this on the day before Thanksgiving. So, amongst the cooking and the preparations in our house, we're trying to get a turkey. Well, I said we. My husband's trying to get the turkey. And so we're a little bit scattered, but I'm super happy to be finally doing this after aligning schedules and fall sicknesses and stuff with Brittany Wardlow. I'm going to let her introduce herself here shortly, but she is an SDR master for startups. And so we're going to pick her brain today on a very interesting podcast. Before we get started, welcome again to the Go to Market Lab. This is a podcast, as a reminder, for founders and early stage revenue leaders who are really trying to figure out how to break the code of the art and the science of go to market and what it really takes at each different stage or phase, if you will, the journey of your company, and so what is needed at that point. So ideally, what we do on this show is we talk about things that I think sometimes people don't want to share, which is what works and what doesn't, and what are techniques that we can use. Because I'm a big believer that we all are in tech, we all are in different segments, and although you may have similar products, there's space for all of us to be successful. So with that being said, today I'm going to shake it up and do something different than the normal Q&A guest piece. Brittany and I have known each other for a while. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to do a format that I'm going to call, Dear Kathleen, which is here are questions that I know my clients have had and come up, and in just offline discussions I've had with some followers on LinkedIn around specific questions they have related to their startup. So we're going to talk about those questions specifically around trying to generate your outbound. Perfect world, you have inbound, but trying to do your outbound in those early stages with Brittany. But before we rip into that, Brittany, you want to give us a little bit of a background on yourself so the listeners all know whose other beautiful voice you're listening to today?
Yeah, happy to. I'm so happy to be here. So thanks for hosting me, Kathleen. A little bit about me. I have been in tech sales for about a decade now. So I've ridden the wave of, an early stage startup and went to a large, Fortune 500 tech company. And then now I'm back in the startup world. I would say what I personally really enjoy is the challenge of building from nothing and starting from scratch and seeing something really grow and then being able to scale it out. So for me, it started on the SDR side of things, then I moved to leadership and the AE side of the business. And now I run all of that at a startup with a very small, lean team. So I've definitely been through the trials, been through the growth phase, been through, unfortunately, a couple layoff phases, and have seen what works and doesn't work. And the honest truth is that's always evolving, which is honestly exciting for me because now with AI, I think there's a lot that's going to be changing in the sales world. And I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that why I'm so excited to have you on, Brittany, is that, your purview of or the timeline of your experience. You lived through the pandemic, pre-pandemic, during pandemic, post-pandemic, and you have gravitated to really finding out about the new technology and not really being scared of it. And so I think there's kind of a special profile that now we have to start to think about in the kind of inside sales and SDR arena. And that, yes, like there is new tech. And so if you're not going to use it, and you're going to knock on it, guess what? Your competitors are using it. So I think there's just a very fresh perspective you have, Brittany, but yet with the trials and tribulations of what has worked and what hasn't at very difficult times, I would say, in our market that we've had in a very tumultuous market over the last, 5-6 years or so. So without further ado, so we'll start, Dear Kathleen, I just named that just now. Oh, but before we get started, to explain my hoodie, which is not my normal view, Brittany, I thought about you and I got dressed this morning because for the listeners that you're seeing on YouTube, we're on YouTube now. With my San Diego Bear, California Bear surf shirt that I got last time my daughter and I were in the Sanitas. And so anyways, I thought about you. I'm in landlocked Texas, so don't be fooled by my surfboard in the background. That was once in the water, but now it is wall art in Dallas, Texas. So anyway, so before we get started, so let's get started now. So, okay, so Dear Kathleen, so let's start off with this big, meaty question. And I know we're going to go zig and zag either ways from jumping off from this. And so I'm going to paraphrase here. So Dear Kathleen, my startup we're Series A. We are still working on a design partner. So although it's going well, we don't have case studies to publish yet. With that being said, our investors are on us. We don't have to solve world hunger. We don't have to get these crazy revenue goals, but we do have to get at least some sales underneath our belt, but it's just kind of hard because we just are freshly launching our website. We feel like we've done some ICP work. We've got our key go to market messaging. So we're all good with all these, I would say, prerequisites, but um, we're not getting any success. We hired a hot shot, what we thought was a seasoned sales rep, and as an enterprise sales rep for a while, one woman show and just not really getting the leads. And so the question is, what do we do about this? We've thought about, should we hire an outsourced SDR BDM agency? Should we hire a manager and kind of bring it in source? Should we look at automation tools? Or should really dump all of our time into thought leadership and try to create some inbound. And let me just preface this with our company's technology is not a category creator. It is an existing market. It is a better solution to an existing market. So it is a displacement likely situation for our prospects. And we do have a very specific niche and a very specific industry that we can at least focus on versus just kind of randomly different industries. So, what advice do you have for us, Brittany?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very loaded question. And I think,
Yeah, let's unpack it. First, I have a feeling you're going to go to, we touched on prerequisites, but just what would be the first things you would ask just to, let's say, quality check that the company is really at a stage where they're ready to go with some outbound motions?
yeah, I've lived this life, and I think I've lived it multiple times at the current company I'm at, because I mean, you have to be nimble, you have to pivot, you have to read the market, and your discovery and your prospects are going to tell you a lot about the market. So, I mean, I would love to sell that. It's market ready. You already have partners that are building with you, and it's market fit. You've defined your ICP. This sounds wonderful. But the reality is companies might think that, but as soon as you actually go to market, that might change a bit. And so, having the right team in place, but also the right structure and technology behind that person or that team is going to be really important in your ability to sell. So, outside of I think we need to go back to like prospecting, right? So, how are you building out your account list? How are you penetrating into your account list and talking to the right people? All too often, you think you have this wonderful list. You have like your strike list, the top 20, and then maybe below that you have, your other accounts that you're going to go after. But the reality is, if you aren't building the right network and you're not, a thought leader or positioning yourself even on LinkedIn and these other platforms as someone that's being built their career in this space and understands the challenges that you're facing, it's going to be really hard. So, I mean, we can back it a lot of different ways. You have one AE, hotshot AE. Great. How are they currently prospecting, building their lists, and doing their outreach? And I think that's where you have to start, is back in the SDR world. Even if this AE is a closer and, you give them 10 meetings in a week and they're going to close these deals, how are you getting those meetings, right? And with the right people. And I think that's the biggest challenge that you're going to face.
Let's unpack that first. Is I think, I knew we're going to zig and zag because there's so many topics that Brittany and I thought we could talk about. But I think just one punctuation to the AE comment is that I think many a times, especially for those leaders who maybe don't come from a sales background and can look at a sales resume and say, oh, great, they've been in sales. Let's go do this. I think one of the things that sometimes gets overlooked is really reviewing that salesperson's background to understand what type of selling have they done. There is a market difference between those who are hunters versus farmers. There's a market difference between being a hunter, e.g. a cold, wanting to get net new logos in a startup versus even a mid-sized organization that at least has a separate SDR team. So, the $1 million question quite literally is that, hey, in an interview, have you created your own market, prospecting campaigns? Now, when it comes down to doing the work, running the sequences and making the dials, do you typically do that? Or do you rely on an SDR to do that? And so if you're at the stage where you haven't built out an SDR team, I mean, we'll talk about that later if that's, that is really where you should be first. But if you have somebody who is an account executive, a lot of times they have moved past the cold calling phase, and not to say they can't do it, but it's not something they're excited about, whether they think it's not something that they're overqualified for or not. It's just not something that's fun to them. And a lot of times, unless you have a very special personality who like loves getting on the phone and that challenge of getting somebody to stay on the phone with you, or wanting to, have that thrill of actually getting the meeting cold, it's really hard. So, your thoughts around that. So I think let's just double click into, you just mentioned a really good, great team. So if you're going to hire internally, so let's imagine you don't have any salespeople yet. Brittany, what is the profile of who you're hiring for, and what is the remit of what they're doing in these early days?
Yeah, attracting talent and the right talent is like step one, because if you have a bad hire and you only have one seat, you're screwed. Like that person's going to be there at least a couple quarters building, you put them on a plan. And if it doesn't work out, you let them go. But now you've wasted potentially like half a year on someone. And then you have to start from ground zero. So I think the right profile is someone who has closing experience. It's someone who has done the outbound motion. I've hired AEs that were top AEs, but they were at a company where everything was inbound or SDR source. So they had a really high close rate, went to President's Club, hot to trot. They're passionate about the market. They sold in the same market even that we're selling into. They came in and it was a shock to the system to do outbound. And this one rep, she's wonderful. She came to me multiple times and she's like, this is really a blow to my ego. I'm not used to getting no so many times. I know what we're sitting on in a product. Like, how do I let them listen to my pitch? You can't even get to the point where you're pitching. Like, and the truth is that it wasn't a good fit in the end. Like, this person is a great salesperson, closing perspective. They understand the nuances and multi-threading and all of that, but it's just getting the meeting. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy, which is why there is an SDR function and an AE function. I would say the profile of someone is an experienced closer, but in their SDR days, they were part of a startup. They had to do outbound, because if it is just an SDR, they're going to get so lost. And if they don't have a trainer to teach them the nuances of, how to book your next meeting, you should go over it, how you don't have to go over everything in one call. Like a junior salesperson's going to want to just throw it all out there. It's too much for the prospect. It's not going to work out. You're not going to close the deal.
Yeah. Now, should you really be hiring one? So what I hear you describing is a bit of a pinch hitter who can do the deals, but also can prospect. In my experience, I find that very hard. I wonder if you would agree. So would you hire? So I guess given the choice, let's just be real about budget. Typically your budget can either afford one, let's call it seasoned AE, or you could do two SDRs for one seasoned AE. So maybe compare and contrast, why you would take one route versus the other, Brittany.
Yeah, I think it depends on, is this a founder led sales motion? Like, who are the SDRs pushing those meetings off to? Because you can't expect for them to also be closing. And I think that's a really big deal. So some companies I've been at, it is founder led sales. The CEO is very in the weeds with the sales team, willing to take those calls. Other times the CEO is really not available unless it's a big deal or something that's really going to move the needle. But all of those deals do count as well. So you look at your business and think, is this founder led sales or is it product led sales? Is the market really receiving what we're putting out there and wanting to buy it? And if that's the case, then maybe you can have like a full cycle rep, because you are naturally just going to have more inbound. The truth is, as a founder, you have to get into the deals. If you're going to hire two SDRs meetings, but you have to be full for the meetings. You have to be willing to take feedback on these sales calls. You can't just say, yes, 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 all of that works when your product isn't there yet. It's asking, why do you need that? How has that been solved with other, platforms that you've used in the past? So that, I'm a firm believer when my CEO is on calls with us, he's in the weeds, right? Like, he's listening to what the market is telling us and he's talking to our product team, our engineering team. Those calls are really important. He's also not on every single call because he's a busy person. He's running our business, he's side of things. So two SDRs, sure, if you have the resources to train them and make sure that, in a remote environment that they're working all the time and they have the support that they need, great. It's just a matter of like, where are you as a founder and CEO, and where is your time going to be spent? Because SDRs do need a lot of support. They're early in their career. They need training. So either way, you're going to have to do a lot. is the bottom
Yeah,
line. So
100%, 100%. And I think this is where, well, I'll say this, and I'm saying this as firstborn child of an immigrant who watches my budget very, very carefully in all walks of my life. That I think sometimes it's really hard in those early stages, whenever cash is king and you're worried about your burn rate, is to really try to do sales and marketing investment on the cheap. And, I remember talking to a female founder who, when her company won the RSA Technology Innovation Lab contest during the pandemic, and her words of wisdom was, a good sales team is worth their weight in gold, which is quite literally, accurate. And so I think that the thing is to your point is, okay, you can allow the budget where you want to. So to your point, Brittany, in a perfect world, in addition to those two SDRs, you should really have now, let me be clear. I'm saying these words, first line sales manager. I'm not saying a CRO, right? So what does that mean? That means, you want a manager who is seasoned, who perhaps is going to be able not only to ramp, train, and to onboard your SDR team, but also to be able to have the experience to understand, we're not getting the results we want. Is it really actually us? Let me look at the metrics. Seems like we're doing all the right stuff. Let's start tweaking the marketing message. Or maybe we're not looking at the right ICP, and to really bring the question to the cohesive Exco team and say, hey, I feel like we've done our job and done a college try. We need to start, tweaking some other part of the formula. So, e.g., we're doing our part, which is the execution. Should we change the message? Should we change the ICP? Because it's an algebra equation. Just because you're not getting calls doesn't mean because you're not doing the work and getting the dials, or you suck at the voicemail, or whatever that case is. And so I get, from your, thought process, if you're going to go down that route, then give me the profile of like who could be that for, what are the must have skills or experience requirements to have with those two SDRs, to have somebody manage them and bring someone on.
and I mean, that is my profile, right? So I was a salesperson.
I don't want to say it. I'm just saying, too bad Brittany doesn't have many needs. Yeah, I think in the day of the AI, we actually can start to replicate her. More on that later. I'm creating mini Kathleen as we speak in the background for my low touch clients. But anyways, until then, Brittany, let's talk about what the quals would be. Would you be looking for?
Yeah. So I mean, startup life, you have to be hungry for it. You have to work for it. It's not going to fall in your lap. And I love that part. It's the creativity. So do you have someone who has a sales leadership experience, right? Maybe they've managed SDRs. Hopefully they've also closed themselves. They can do a little bit of both, right? Like they could take some of these calls. The SDRs will book them. CEO is unavailable. They're going to take these calls. They can close, maybe some of, if you're enterprise, some of the mid-market deals or lower end deals. But they're in the trenches with the reps, right? They're coaching on calls. Calls are always recorded these days. So how often are they doing sales stand-ups every morning? Are we looking at our metrics? What campaigns are working? Which ones aren't? Okay. How many call reviews are they doing a week with their reps? Are they doing live listening and coaching their reps? How many role plays? Like all of that matters. You can't just give a computer and a phone to a SDR and say, here's LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Good luck. Go out there. You need to be every day working with these reps so that they can improve. And that investment alone will pay dividends. So making sure that you're not just hiring these reps. I mean, like I'm thinking I had a referral call for a rep that was on my team in the past. And this founder called me and said, hey, like I'm having a hard time. I don't know who to hire. What should I? And I basically said, like, this person is mature. They have a lot of sales experience, actually have closing experience outside of tech. They want to break into tech. So they started in an SDR role. They took a step down. If you want meetings, this person will book you meetings. They're mature. They're responsible. They will get you meetings. Are they going to close? I haven't given that person the opportunity to, but if you're to coach this person, they're hungry. So it's like having the right profile of someone. I honestly think the best salespeople didn't start as an SDR straight out of college, is the bottom line, right? They've lived, they've seen, like in tech, you can make a lot of money. So they've seen the other side. They're hustling, they're working, they're doing whatever it is that they're doing. And they come to tech and they're like, I can make what if I do that? So they're hungry. They have that ambition. Whereas someone right out of college don't really know. And they're like, oh my gosh, this job is so hard. Yeah, it's hard. But guess what? You can really grow and make money down the line if you just invest in it now.
there's so many different ways to cut it whenever you're doing an interview. But at the end of the day, you just have to figure out what is motive. I know it's really hard because you're trying to do it in a 1 hour interview or a half a day fly-in meeting or what have you. You're trying to figure out what makes that person tick and why they're driven to get to where they are. I have a funny story to that, just real fast. I asked, so this person had gone through the gauntlet. So I was their, third interview. And I'd asked them, hey, give me an order of priority. What do you want to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years? 1, 2, 3. Because the narrative that I had gotten from the manager that interviewed before was, hey, they're about to get married, they're wanting to start a family, so they've got all this motivation. I was like, well, that sounds good. And so when I asked the question and I asked them to prioritize it, first was funding their hobby, which was impromptu comedy. Second was real estate, and then third was funding the family. And I was like, and then we kind of went into, this person told me about, how competitive they are and how they loved sports because of the competition. And, my follow up to that question as somebody who is not good at sports, because I've not coordinated with hand-eye coordination with the ball, is I would say, well, did you find sports like came easy? Like, what did you feel like? What made you successful? Yeah, pretty much like anything I did, I probably listen. You want that, but if you say that, my husband is a very good athlete. He'll also tell you worked his butt off and, he wasn't the best person on his team, but he also was team captain because of that. You want to understand what is it about that experience, so it's not just the face value answer you're looking for. I have to keep looking. So anyways, I'm hoping that person's not listening to the podcast, but I didn't name the person. Okay. But, so let's move down the line here. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, are we name dropping? Because there is someone, former CEO of a company, and honestly, coaches founders, and there's something that he shared a post, and it was about interviewing and the 5 things to look for. And it was so insightful. It's how we hired at the last company I was at. Whether or not it was defined that way, it was definitely part of the way we used like Glassdoor, and each manager asked a certain set of questions to qualify for, experience, culture, fit in all different categories. And it's great. And I think a lot of it goes to those intangibles, like what motivates them, and asking that one additional question. You hit it spot on. Like, oh, they were an athlete. Great. That usually is a good profile of a sales rep. Well, like, were they MVP? Were they, a leader on the team? Did it come easy? Like, those are all great
Yeah.
questions.
Was it that, did they have a Steph Curry story where they started at the bottom and they rose to the top? Like, or were they, or were they just like, I'm trying to think of another athlete, but, most athletes, even you take Kobe and Michael Jordan, they will also tell you how much grind they put in it. I used to live in Newport Beach. I would see Kobe at the gym. After he was retired, he was in there at 5 a.m., and it's in your DNA. Right. And for whatever, that was, it was in his DNA. It was nothing about growing up in poverty in his case, et cetera, but just whatever wired, fueled him. It was that. Let's kind of move on to like the next part of the second. So let's just hypothesize for this dear Kathleen caller in, if you will. Okay. So we've said, hey, founder, you're going to make this investment. They've kind of said, okay, I buy into that. I'm going to hire a SDR manager who is roll up the sleeves, hands on, not just managing from afar, and 2 SDRs. We're going to build a great culture. Now, how the heck do we get the meeting, Brittany? Like, what can you give? I know there's many different ways, but like, what is it that I'm looking? Is it, well, I mean, let's just start at the beginning. What should we use? Email?
2024, right? So we're not looking at the tech tools when SDR teams were scaling and like everyone's hiring like crazy and they're all using different, sequencing tools, etc. While those are important and definitely still being used, we have AI now. There are so many different AI tools. I follow some content creators around sales on TikTok, and they're always kind of like boosting, oh, you can train an AI to message your contacts on LinkedIn. We have a paid version of that. It's wonderful for our team. You put in your ICP, your geolocation, anything that you want, you can create these campaigns. We've gotten as much as like 18 meetings a month in enterprise where these people are like actually.
That's a lot of meetings. Okay, lovely. For the listeners who don't have context here, I just came off of helping a client and sitting in, they're interviewing Brittany outsourced SDR. And so I would say across 3 different calls, what I heard was, what good looks like is 10 to 12 meetings a month. And that's after ramp. So after 3 months. So holy smokes, what you're talking about is
A top rep too.
yeah, that's a top part. And that's after ramp, after like you've calibrated, right? After you fine tune. You're saying 18 meetings, but boil that down on a per SDR basis. How many per SDR?
Okay, so there are two of us using the tool. The best individual month, my colleague got 18 meetings from using this AI tool. And let me break down what it does. So you put in your ICP, your location. You can also upload your personal contact list. And the goal is to send a request that's personalized. And so the AI tool scans LinkedIn. It also scans Google for like news articles, podcasts, etc. And if I'm reaching out to you, Kathleen, it's like Tinder for prospecting. So I'm going to see Kathleen Randall. It's going to say, oh, she recently posted a podcast. It will compose a message for me referencing said podcast, a little bit about, why I'm reaching out, and I can send that connection request. So I can take the copy that it provided for me. I can then go look at your LinkedIn profile and see, oh, no, she's got decades of experience in tech and leadership. Maybe I want to include that. It starts to know the way you're messaging and changes the messages over time. So like, I always reference the longevity of someone's career in a certain sector. Now, whenever my leads come up, I'm like, yes, swipe right, essentially send it. Great. The connection request is sent. As soon as they accept, they're then enrolled into a sequence where those messages are not written by AI. They're kind of like pre-populated. I have a link to my calendar, etc. Or I can no, wrong timing, wrong trigger, right? It could be any number of triggers. They posted on LinkedIn, they wanted on LinkedIn, monitor for another trigger. So I have in the background all of the prospects being monitored while other people are booking meetings. My colleague got 18 meetings in a month, which was amazing. This was in July. And we have officially closed one deal, have 3 really big enterprise deals in our pipeline just from when we started using this tool in May.
Yeah, and have you continued to see that same success month over month, or has it been up and down, or what have you seen?
It's ebbed and flowed. It's never been down so bad that we're like, this isn't worth using the tool. There's definitely seasonality. And I think there's definitely seasonality in different markets. The market that we sell into, we work with nonprofits. And so there is a big ebb and flow as when people are taking meetings, when budgets come available, all of that. It's like that in any sector. Well, we have noticed that. And we also have noticed we've had to tweak the messaging, right? Like for whatever reason, it's not landing or looking at your, there's analytics and built into all these tools. So you can see the different campaigns you're running, who's being enrolled in them, and we tweak it. I go and look at my colleague's success. And I'm like, what is she doing? What's working? She'll look at mine. She'll ask me, are you re-enrolling them in sequences? Or are you just starting to chat with them once they make a connection request? But in the enterprise market, it's really hard to get these meetings. And the fact that we've been able to get so many, honestly, punching above what we can even sell into right now is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and let's go. I think we can go ahead, and I don't think you would mind the founder sharing the tool, and then I want to do a follow up to that because we've talked about budgeting for this tool is a little bit more challenging. And to be clear, if are you only using this tool and are you using several others?
We're using several tools to do all of our outbound and sales motion. So can I list all of them?
Yeah. Please.
The tool that I'm referencing is called Samplead, and it's been amazing. We work directly with the team. I'm assuming not every user of this product has a direct Slack channel with them, but I've been very lucky to work directly with the team. And as we request new features, those features are rolled out. So it has been incredible. We've been working with them for, I think, since May and have closed a deal and have substantial pipeline built due to this tool, to the point where we have really slowed down on our traditional outbound, like cold calling, sending gifts in the mail, because we have so many meetings or follow-ups. It's another piece with like the SDR and closer. It takes a lot of time to close deals. So you can't spend all your time on outbound. So we use Samplead, we use Gong, we use the AI version. So Gong Engage, which will remind you to send an email and draft the email, records all of our calls. We use HubSpot, which chef's kiss, love it, especially for early stage companies. You don't have to have like a Salesforce operator in there all the time building everything that you need. We've used a lot of tools in the past, but that's like generally our tech stack right now.
So just to clarify, Gong, you're using it for the emails and Samplead, and for the listener, so it looks like sample ads or Samp Lead, SAMPLEAD. Are you using that primarily for LinkedIn and then using Gong for emails, or how are you bifurcating those two different tools?
So we use Apollo for data enrichment. So Apollo does have a sequencing tool built in. The features vary slightly, like being able to A/B test, things like that. Some tools have it, some don't. But We send out all of our messaging through Gong for the most part. And then we have to pay for LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is like $100 a month per rep, unless you have a team, and then you can.
And you and Brittany and I have talked about this before, just in terms of talking shop and their organization to toot their horn. They've got an amazing person who is extraordinary in terms of setting up the go-to-market tech stack for them. And not all companies have that at all. I know my clients don't even have HubSpot rolled out or any sort of CRM. And so I think that, I'll just put a shameless plug in. That's a big reason why in my consulting practice, we have decided we are launching basically a managed service to have that, because to your point, it's not just running the tech in which we are doing, but it's also looking for the signals and figuring out what do I need to do in terms of the strategic go-to-market planning and the ICP and the messaging to tweak based off those signals. And so what would you say? So this is a very tactical question, but just briefly, what would you say, what you also don't want to do is like changing things just because N equals 3 didn't respond to you. So when do you think is a good time? Like, how do you know you've gotten enough at bats per se for that specific campaign or that message before you tweak, just to know you're not tweaking too soon or too late? How much time do you let something marinate out there before you start to get the sense if you need to change your approach in your outbound message?
I don't wait for thousands in my sample size. We wait for a couple hundred generally, because we do customize a lot too. I'm pulling up my campaigns right now just to like give you all an idea. My top performing campaign, I have, it's loading, I think around 800. Yeah, I was going to say 800, 8 to 900. Booking rate is, that's like approved people, like swiped right. This is the right person. I want to send out a connection request. I've connected with 36% of those, which is pretty great. 11% have replied, which means we're going back and forth. And that could also be people that are not interested. And then 2% have booked. So yeah, it's a much better numbers than just a cold outbound email sequence for sure. And it's the right ICP. I'm not building this list, right? Like the list is being built for me. The one piece that the caveat is we are a small team. So for small teams, this tool is wonderful. For large teams where you have territories and everyone is segmented out, you don't have the ability to just say like, the whole market is mine, me and my.
Right. You're talking about sampling, right? Yeah.
Yes. Me and my colleague, we're mindful of each other. Like, she lives in a certain area. So if it's, her hometown, her state, I just send that lead to her. She'll send leads to me in California.
Yeah.
We know the accounts are already deals. It's easy. But for a scaled team, I would say it's definitely not the best tool just yet. But for startups, it's expensive, but we call it our SDR team, right? Like we're both closers. Our SDR team many qualified meetings in the enterprise space for us.
Yeah. And so I think, for the listeners, what I want to point out here, to be very clear, that I can pick up, because I know Brittany, but if you don't know Brittany, you won't be able to pick up here because she's being subtle and humble about it, is that the difference is in their philosophy that they're executing so well at the organization is that they've got 2 senior leaders who are not afraid to get their hands dirty, and B, they're augmenting their time with technology so that they can force multiply their sales and their time in terms of reach. Now, the other kind of nuance that I want to call out, I'm not, as a former sales leader who is very protective of my price book, I'm not going to say the pricing here, but I do want to just put an asterisk to say the tools that Brittany are using are not $100 per month tools. And so one of the things that I would also I've had kind of honestly my own lessons learned, Brittany, I'd love you to talk about your experiences here, is that I've tried actually, and not well, I tried to stand up for a client, using a bunch of this $100 tool here, $100 tool here. And the problem is you got to weave them all together, and there's still kind of like, it's not a one-stop shop per se for that modality. Like in that case, that we were doing email. And so I was using Apollo for enrichment. I was using this tool for email warming. I was this tool to set up the cold email domains. I was using this tool to do outbound. And I was like, reports coming out of my out of my ears and my eyeballs. And, at the end of the day, I think one of the things that you've done well in terms of your tool selection is you have a few, but you're getting the ones that will have the most reach. And so you don't have to manage multiple things while still getting results?
They're all integrated. That's another key factor. When early in my sales career, I managed a SDR outbound team. I had 17 reps at one point, which was crazy. 7 minutes to dedupe based off of all the tools we were using, even cold call a lead. And if you look at the percentage of speed to lead when someone converts, if you can get to them in like the first 5 minutes, it's like astronomically higher conversion rate, like 800%, something wild, where like they click the button and then you reach out, they're going to be willing to talk. If it takes you first, the leads round robin, then the rep kind of like gets back from lunch, gets to it. It's like a couple hours later, the prospect isn't thinking about you anymore, right? So they're going to let you go to your voicemail. They'll get to the email later. They might.
Yeah, it's interesting that I love that you pointed that out, Brittany, because I'll just put this out there. Somebody who was coaching me said, or they were kind of helping me set up my Dripify sequence in this case. So Dripify is for LinkedIn. They're like, maybe, you don't want to respond that quickly to it. I was like, why not? Like, I know for me, like if I have a window where I happen to have a break, like, and you engage me, then there's about a 90% response. Once I'm like out of that window, good luck. You're waiting till the
Yeah,
next
you're
window.
on to something else.
Yeah. So you disagree with that as well. Like faster the better.
100%. If I have someone replying on LinkedIn and like I get that ding ding and I'm like on another tab, I'm like, oh, who responded? I know I got Samp lead running in the background. I can reply right away, and then we're like, hey, happy to connect. Wonderful. What does your next couple weeks look like? I mean, if you want to be more aggressive, how does tomorrow work? In time, you know.
Okay. So what about calls? Are you guys doing dials?
We were doing dials. And lately with Samplead, we have not been cold calling as much. I do call accounts, but it is, I can explain to you the ebb and flow of our business. We did have a full blown SDR team, multiple reps, multiple fees, and we went through a big layoff last August. And that is really unfortunate. And that is the first time I personally was really at like the helm of leading this team. And when we crunched the numbers, it just didn't make sense to have the reps. We weren't getting the output that we needed. And these people were doing everything we asked of them. They weren't bad sales reps. We were coaching them. It's really expensive to have an SDR. It takes a lot of time to maintain that team, to train them and keep them motivated. Yeah, it just wasn't working out. And so we were cold calling a lot. And cold calling a lot doesn't equal a lot more opportunity. If you're calling the right accounts and you have the right product and you have the right messaging, like it really has to fit. I am a believer in cold calling. I love it personally. It's a challenge, but you need to make sure you're strategic about it and you're not just giving someone a list to call down, but having the right prospecting tools. We use Apollo to build out a lot of our prospecting before we had Samplead. And this is early stage again. So if you have a more skilled team and you have more inbound, work off of your inbound and cold calling it on 100% of the time. 100%. Outbound, I would send gifts in the mail first and then cold call. That landed very well. I booked a that way, but that takes a lot of time. Out hard. Go to the post office, print the labels, like a whole thing. For enterprise, sure. Yeah, it does work better. My list is a little tighter, but cold calling still works. It just cold calling down a list is not what I would recommend. Being really strategic and who you're calling, all of that.
Yeah, I'm actually starting, and I just preface this with I don't know the results yet, so I'm not recommending this per se because I can't speak to it yet. But I'm actually starting to experiment with ringless voicemails to replace cold calling, kind of ringless in terms of getting at least those multiple touches. But to your point, I think the biggest thing is being able to make sure that you can calibrate as much as you can on those intent signals. So Apollo is great because you can have, especially if those who are listening who are on technology and even specifically cyber, there's a lot of intent signals that it's honing in on. You can break up the whole cyber category. But I mean, I've been like gangbusters on Clay recently. So as this aggregator, so if you don't know about Clay, Google it, listen to the top line interview of their two founders. It's like Airtable meets Zapier, Maker, your workflow meets like a one-stop shop to pull in all of these integrations with all these different tools. So if you need a Power for this, you need SEMrush for this, it's pulling it all in and you work in that interface, but it's deduping for you. So you don't have to worry about it. It can get really expensive fast. So if you don't know how to use the right modalities to use free versus pay credits, et cetera. But I think one of the things that I found in there is that I can use different sets of tools to so like one of my campaigns I'm running for a client, I'm not just using the signals that I'm using for is I'm looking for their IT growth in a certain percentage. I'm looking for certain keywords in the LinkedIn profile, and I'm looking to see who is liking this particular competitor's post. And so hence my personalization quote unquote message is super laser focused on the assumptions of those three people. So I'm not saying, hey, go dogs. Like it's not personalization because they're university, it's personalization because it sounds like I'm really speaking to where I think I'm taking a guess as to what, where they are within their growth experience. And in this case, it's hospital systems. I'm calibrating on number of beds, which is not a traditional right metric as well. So I have that coming from another system. So it's one of those where you got to get really, I think the advocates of cold, I've heard some naysayers, Brittany, and I want to hear your comment to this is emails aren't working anymore because, all the CISOs I know or the CTOs are saying, hey, I've gotten so many, I don't respond.
I don't 100% disagree. I think there's a place for email always. I would wonder how customized they are. Networking is always more important. So if you can mention someone, like if it's a referral, obviously there's ways emails work. Cold email, not as great nowadays. We always customize the first email, but again, I would send a gift in the mail. So the subject line is like purple box in the mail, gift to you. Like they're going to open that email because they just got a purple box in the mail, right? No, I don't do it as my sole way of outbound. Like, no, it's just not. Cold call over email, cold voicemail, left you a voicemail in the subject line, talked to so and so at competitor or, whatever other thing, just so that it piques their interest. But a cold email,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think this is where, sometimes a conundrum is like another client, another dear Kathleen is, yeah, we can do that, but like, we don't have a network. Like, so I'm having a hard time getting a jumping off point. And look, let me put in my like public service announcement because I know Brittany is going to agree with this. At the end of the day, like you got to have a freaking hot shot sales rep who is going to like not let failure ever happen. Like this stuff is hard. I don't care what tools you're using, how awesome your marketing message is. Like this stuff is a hustle. And I think sometimes non-sales leaders like this isn't happening fast enough. And like, why isn't this person? It's like this stuff takes time. And so what you should be measuring, however, is to understand that in my opinion, that your sales reps are doing the work. Like you should be able to log and see, are they playing the hustle, the dials, the LinkedIn, whatever. And if that's all happening and you're still not getting results, then you have to question, do you really have a relevant product? Is the go-to-market make sense? But also, to your point, like you got it sent gifts. And just a little plug, by the way, Brittany, I'll send you the notes on this. You can actually automate handwritten notes. There's a product called Handwritten with a Y. And then you merge that with Zapier to connect to your HubSpot and it'll just do it for you. Kind of brilliant. Like it looks like it actually handwritten. But
I mean, all of this adds up too. So we're like, okay, what's the opportunity cost? It's like, ends up being, depending on the volume that you're doing, $5 for just a card. And then I have like 300 of them. What if I just, get the cards from Staples and like have, build something on Canva, go pick them up at Staples, write them myself, spend half a day doing it. Like how many meetings do I have? Like what's the opportunity cost? If you're starting from nothing, you kind of got to get crappy. Like I literally go put in an order at Staples after I build it on Canva, come home, had a day where I just like hand wrote cards. I had ChatGPT write the copy and then I would tweak it based off of, little things. Looking at the computer, I memorized these messages by the end.
or so you got a PA. Yeah.
Yeah, with clay, which I've never heard of, and it sounds amazing. But what you just explained was that you got super targeted. And I would say, even here at a startup, starting from nothing, like we needed innovation partners. When we got laser focused on a really seemingly smaller market, we had more success. And I think that's something that people need to remember because founders are like, no, this can help everyone. And we need to go out and talk to anyone and this and that. Don't do that. When you get laser focused, I only am talking to teams with 30% growth in X time period. There's all metrics you can search for. When you do that, you will find more success. You're going to reach out to less people, but you're going to have the right conversations with the right people and it's going to accelerate your business. You're going to build for the client that you want to sell into. Using all of those filters, first of all, it sounds amazing, but you can do that. Maybe not like the number of beds, like you mentioned, but when you can figure out that piece of it, the people that you're talking to, you tell them, I reached out to you because of X, Y, and Z. Right. And they're like, oh, me? Really? Wow. You know all that? You've done your homework. I'm so impressed. Like,
Exactly. And I think the biggest thing is that you've got to get creative sometimes in how to find. So like the example that I read, and I'm forgetting which book. I'm like, I've got books coming out of my wazoo right now. I'm trying to get them all into a bookshelf. Is the example was this particular ICP was fast going restaurants. Well, you're not going to, these are privately, you're not going to see like fast going restaurants. Here's the list. And so what they did is to find the signals is they looked at restaurants that had over a certain number of reviews and the trend line of the number of reviews growing. And they're like, okay, well, clearly there's people coming and they've hit this certain level as a substitute for the proxy for fast growing restaurants. So the point is there's some creativity and if, for those data people on is like, what could be a data set that I could actually scrape the web to get a hold of that replaces that. So like, for example, if you don't know number of beds, you could look for and you're looking for something that's growing and you didn't know that that the team is growing. You might look for hospitals with press releases that they're opening up new locations or doing a merger and acquisition, or hey, we've got a new ambulatory wing that we're opening up, and looking for those types of things, right? Or looking for certain news wires, just seeing that who's publishing, like maybe I'm calibrating on hospitals that have a very active press release, right? Over, four over the last year. So maybe that shows you there's some activity and they're trying to drum pipeline or growth or et cetera. So again, I knew we could talk and talk and talk. So I know we're coming up into like the punchline and, never, never, never do a podcast over an hour, which I kind of disagree with, but thank you so much. There might be a part two. I think Brittany, we're probably going to have to unpack another Dear Kathleen session because this has been super fun. Thank you so much for listeners for the line. As a reminder, if you guys like this podcast, please make sure to like, and reminder, we're now on Apple. We're on every modality you can think of, Spotify, and now we're on YouTube. And so like your favorite modality and make sure that you're doing that so you can get updates on the newest episodes. I am sure Brittany wouldn't mind if you wanted to send messages to her directly on LinkedIn, myself as well. Or most probably the easiest way is just to add a comment. If you have a question, we'll certainly be able to respond to those. If we didn't touch on a topic that this may be spurred a thought process for you, just send a message, say, hey, I really would like you to to double click into this particular area. Then that is great. It gives us good opportunities and ideas for future episodes. So with that being said, I wish you the best in terms of growing your growth strategy. Thank you for listening to the Go to Market Lab. Be sure to subscribe. Thank you so much, Brittany, for a really awesome time. And now we can enjoy the rest of our, we're in America. So American Thanksgiving. I'm gonna rat out Brittany and say she's gonna be running out of the house for a day date with her husband, and very much needed. For those on the line, another shameless plug: gratitude might also mean leaving your small human beings. You can go be grateful by yourself with your significant other. At least in my house, it is. And so, anyway, so that being said, thank you so much.
yes, this was so fun. Let's definitely do it again. And yes, happy to answer any questions. Also.
For sure. But wait, just so you know, your husband can play the guitar in the next one in the outro. Like maybe I can think of a theme song and he can play it. That'd be kind of cool.
I'm not a musician, so don't ask me anything about what's behind
That's
me.
what I mean. Just have him come in and then he'll play my theme song. I'll have to come up with that over the break. No?
I know. San Diego, bring your surfboard. We can have a soundtrack to the beach day. It'll be great.
Exactly. Maybe it's like the Beach Boys soundtrack, maybe a little Jack Johnson, little Slightly Stupid, Sublime. I don't know. So anyways, all right. I'm off my rocker now. As you can tell, I'm really ready for a break. So thank you.